Everybody, welcome to the keynote of this season's Epic Conference. This is Emily Roberts from Snake Discovery. She's going to be chatting with me today about exotic pets in the mainstream. I don't know that we need any further introduction. You obviously clicked on this session to see Emily, so let's go and bring Emily. Please welcome Emily to the Epic Conference stage.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Emily, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being here. Thanks for, in my opinion, what you do for the hobby and presenting everything and our community in such a good light and setting a standard. So it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Hey, we're just happy people want to learn about reptiles, and our videos are entertaining enough to watch. So thank you for all the support, guys.
Well, like I say, our pleasure. With the theme and the topic being exotic pets in the mainstream, let's just start with the why. Why exotic pets for you? What was that moment? What was that aha? What creates that drive behind what you and Ed do at Snake Discovery?
You know, people get into exotic animals for different reasons. For me, it was I was into cats, believe it or not, when I was a kid. I remember growing up, I had posters of cats all over my room. And then I learned I was allergic to them and dogs, so couldn't really have them. So then I'm like, well, what other pets are options out there? And that's what brought me to birds, actually. When I was 10 years old, I got my first bird, so my first exotic pet. And it just kind of steamrolled from there and shifted from birds to reptiles, where I really found a true passion. So for me, it was for health reasons I got into exotics. For Ed, he just had a fascination with the atypical pets. He had grown up with cats and dogs his whole life, but was wanting to try something different. So he got into birds too. That's actually how we met each other, was through birds. And then we both kind of dove into reptiles together.
Oh, cool. What do you say to parents or potential pet owners that go, well, why in the world would I own a frog? Or this snake isn't going to interact with me, or I can't cuddle with X, Y, or Z, sort of in our world. What do you say to them?
You know, although exotics we'll just go with reptiles and amphibians particularly here, although they're not, the right pet for everybody, they're becoming increasingly popular because of the shift from living in larger houses to smaller, more apartments style homes. We need animals that take up a smaller footprint and require just less space overall. So reptiles and amphibians are a good option for that. They only live, in a 4x2x2 foot enclosure or whatever you are keeping them in, versus a dog or a cat, which for dogs need an entire backyard. So I think that's one of the draws nowadays to them. So I guess urbanization, you could call it, is one of the reasons why people are getting into reptiles. But also busy lifestyles, I would say, is another big reason why people get into them. We, in the US at least, are so busy day to day. We don't necessarily have the time to take the dog out 3, 5. I don't know. I don't have a dog. I don't know how often you take them out. You have Lucy, right?
Yeah, we've got 3 dogs. I got Lucy, June, and Baxter. So yeah, you're speaking exactly. I mean, if I didn't work primarily from home or have a place where I could take them, you're right. That plays right into it.
Yeah. How often would you say you have to bring a dog outside with just one dog?
5 times a day.
Okay. Yeah. So 5. I wasn't quite sure. So 5 that sounds about right to me too. But yeah, with reptiles, there's no outside trips that are required. You can give them attention if you want, so you don't necessarily have to. They could take it or leave it. And that's why I'm using reptiles including amphibians as my example here, because birds, which are also an exotic pet, are an entirely different story. They do require a lot of attention.
Right.
But the reptiles, they're so easygoing, and especially for busy lifestyles, a really good option.
I agree, and I'm glad you brought up the pace of life. We're all increasingly busy, trying to do more. We have these efficiencies around us, and some of those things, there's a cost on other areas of life. How have you seen mainstream perceptions and awareness of reptiles change or evolve in your career and in your professional view?
It really has changed quite a bit, and even the last decade, hasn't it? Mm-hmm. I think social media platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok are getting some good PR out there for reptiles, where previously reptiles and especially snakes are always the bad guys in movies, you know. So that
That's
that
right.
didn't give him a pretty it didn't give him a strong start. But nowadays, with how good of pets they really do make, word is being spread on these various platforms, and people are starting to realize that, yeah, this is actually an acceptable option for a mainstream pet. It doesn't just have to be dogs and cats. Sometimes reptiles work out just a lot better for your lifestyle. And I think social media has a lot to play with that.
Who were uh, either what lane, and maybe it's a little bit of both. What lane did you see open? Obviously, you and Ed have a massive social media presence. What lane either did you see open, or who were you inspired by when you started your social media presence?
You know, we didn't start the social media as an inspiration from someone in particular. I mean, the classic is always Steve Irwin for reptiles.
Sure.
He gets so many people into reptiles. But Snake Discovery started as an educational kind of traveling reptile programmer show. And what started that, and essentially after the programs took off, we realized, we can reach a wider audience if we create educational videos. And we just happened to choose YouTube to be the platform to upload to. And what happened after that? It kind of took off.
Right.
But it started as traveling programs. I was working for the Minnesota DNR as a naturalist, and I would teach people about geology, birds, any dendrology, anything related to natural resources at the park that I was stationed at. And once a summer or so, we would hire this man called Randy Korb, the frog guy, who has unfortunately since passed. But he would bring a tarp and almost all of the native amphibians to Minnesota, which unfortunately were all wild caught, but he did use them for educational purposes, which, kind of justifies it a bit. And he would just have these salamanders and frogs and toads one at a time on this tarp, encouraging kids to hand feed them insects during the program that lasted
Cool.
about an hour. And that was the guy who inspired my programs of reptiles, kind of the reptile version of what he would do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the initial inspiration, was Randy Korb, the frog guy, based out of Minnesota, who nobody has heard of, unfortunately, but he knew his stuff. He was great.
That's a cool story, and I hadn't heard that story before, and I'm not familiar with Randy either. That's thank you for sharing that. And if there was somebody watching today who says, I'm pretty curious about this, but it seems overwhelming. There's all these different species. What makes a great first? This is an exotic pet conference, but let's say reptiles, since that's kind of what we're focusing on here. What makes a great first pet? Is there as in a specific species, rather than all the sort of actions we've been talking about? What specifically would be a recommendation if a family comes into Snake Discovery?
I usually recommend, for any species you decide to land on, obviously research an appropriate habitat. You still have to do, I'd say, the same amount of research and preparation, even for beginner species. But the ones that are easiest to set up, I usually give families a couple options for lizards and for snakes based on which one they're more heavily considering. For lizards, I recommend a crested gecko, a leopard gecko, or a bearded dragon, depending on what they're looking for in return from said animal. If they have a lot of space and they want an animal that's more of a family member than just a pet, I recommend a bearded dragon. They require a larger setup and a more expensive setup for sure, but in my opinion, you get a lot more in return from bearded dragons because of those huge personalities. Whereas if somebody wants more of a smaller, maybe they have limited space in their apartment, they just want something in their office, then maybe a crested gecko would be a better option for them. So it depends on lifestyles, but for snakes, I recommend either a corn snake, a ball python, or a Mexican black king snake.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I love Mexican black kings as a starter snake because they're king snakes, so they eat everything. They're generally very docile if you raise them as babies, and they only grow to about 3.5 feet long. They're very manageable size as an adult.
Yeah, those are good points. I hadn't thought of a king snake as a first pet, but you're exactly right about kind of the consternation that can come from trying to feed reptiles, or particularly snakes sometimes. And king snakes will go, that's for sure. They'll help you out on that angle.
a lot of folks want a hognose snake as their first. They're very popular right now, and
Hmm.
I'll admit they're my favorite species of snake. I love working with hognoses. They just have some really neat adaptations to them, and all reptiles do, honestly, which is another reason why they're becoming popular pets. They just are so unique compared to the more traditional dogs and cats. But anyway, pedaling back, the hognose snakes, as cute and as unique as they don't necessarily make a good starter snake because they do have specific care requirements that require a bit of just basic snake experience in order to kind of comprehend. So, yeah, I
Because of
recommend another first and then a hognose second.
because they are so popular and maybe so many people would be attracted to them, what are some of the first like concerns with a hognose of why maybe they make a better second snake than a first snake?
The main reason is because of their eating habits. If you put them in too large of an enclosure, which is the push nowadays, which is fantastic for reptile keeping and the future of reptiles, provide a large enough habitat. Hognoses are one of those weird exceptions that if they are put into something too large or at least too open and exposed, they won't eat. They
Mm,
do this weird thing, and I can't tell you how many times it's happened where we sell a baby hognose that's eating really well for us, and we have it in a 6-quart tub that we're raising it in, and that's what we recommend setting it up in too. Albeit a 6-quart tub looks quite small, so a lot of them end up going into like a 10-gallon tank, and the owner is trying to do their best. But the problem is the hognose feels way too exposed, and they'll eat their first two, sometimes their first 3 meals, and then they stop. I don't know why they eat the first couple, even if they're not happy, but that seems to be the trend with hognoses. If they eat twice for you and they stop, it's too big of a habitat every time.
gotcha. And what sort of, this is sort of, I don't want to put it in a negative light. Where do you see the most success with the first species? And that probably goes back to your initial list of king snakes, corn snakes, and ball pythons.
Yeah, sorry, say that again. The main like success.
Where do you see the most success? Because obviously we want healthy animals and happy owners kind of
Oh
deal.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a few things that I would view as a success in a first pet. First, it would be accessibility to captive bred animals,
Mm,
and that is becoming more and more available nowadays, which is also encouraging the reptile hobby. It's fantastic. We're not importing wild caught animals anymore,
right.
and king snakes, corn snakes, ball pythons, many other species are very easily accessible and in a wide variety of color morphs too. There's a lot of folks who want a pretty snake, quote unquote. They're all pretty in my opinion, but there are options for at least the corns and the ball pythons. And another success, especially for a first time reptile owner, is you want an animal that's going to reliably eat for you. It's tough for someone who is used to cats and dogs that get fed multiple times a day to wrap their head around the fact that snakes eat once a week, once every other week, depending on the species and the size and the age. And if they refuse food one day, it's okay. They don't have to eat every week. They don't eat
Right.
every week in the wild, but that's a really hard concept.
Hmm.
And it causes a lot of stress if you get a snake like a hognose snake that doesn't want to eat for a while, and you just you don't have the understanding and experience to realize that it's okay.
Right. Right.
So I think that's another success is the corns, kings, and ball pythons are typically good eaters as well.
Gotcha. Um, let's circle back to sort of reaching wide audiences and representation of reptiles. I happen to know here in Minnesota you work a lot with the local herp society, which is I would describe it as a community group. And even more importantly to me is I see collaboration between the local DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, and the herp society. Can you talk a little bit about those groups, relationships? We see what you do on screen and on media, but what people can do in their local communities, or if they're interested in becoming part of a local community, what they can do for outside of sitting in front of a computer screen.
Yeah, that's a great question. A fun thing to talk about too. The ultimate goal for the DNR and for local herp societies is to spread education and reptile knowledge in a positive light, because that ends up protecting the animals in the long run. That's why snake discovery started, was to teach people about reptiles so that fewer are killed in the wild. If you have a bigger understanding of them, you'll have a bigger appreciation and wish for them to survive and thrive. But if you're looking to pursue that even further, you already have that spark, then almost every state has a local herpetological society. Some are larger than others. I'm very fortunate to live in Minnesota, where I believe we have the oldest herp society in the
Oh, really?
U.S. I want to say it is. It's been around a long time. They meet every month. First Friday of the month, there's a different speaker with a different topic every month, and the goal is just to spread positive information about these reptiles. So I'd imagine there's smaller clubs as well, but I think the easiest one to find for most folks in the States is if you search your state and herpetological society, if you could spell it, that's going to be your best option for really getting hands-on and becoming involved in the community. Another option I would say is look up local reptile expos.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, we have Tinley coming up here in just a couple of weeks. It's a huge reptile convention. And when people ask me, what is a reptile show? I usually say, like a craft show where you go and all the vendors have the crafts that they've made and they're selling those to the public. Imagine that, but with reptiles on the table instead. And that kind of paints a picture for people who aren't in the reptile community. But that's a great way to get exposed to different species, to see them up close, to learn, and to network with other reptile keepers. So I'd say Herpetological Society membership and local reptile shows are probably the top two ways to get involved locally.
And I think for the audience that might not realize it, because I would 6 years ago, I wouldn't have had any idea. These reptile expos are incredibly prevalent here just in the upper Midwest. I think I'll vend something like 26 shows this year. And
wow.
I could do more if I were to travel more, but that's in a 5 or 6 state area right around us, including Minnesota. So they are out there and the community is there. And they're fun. They're cool. They're cool get-togethers. And to your credit, you and Ed host, 6 a year that you do expos?
Yes, I believe it's 6 a year nowadays that we do. They're nothing like the Tinley show. They're smaller local shows, but yeah, they're a lot of fun. It's nice to get that tight-knit community together every once in a while.
Absolutely. Like the national community is cool and the people that I see sort of on social media, but local relationships are just really, really important and valuable. And that scene is fantastic. And you guys foster that just wonderfully. It's really, really great to see. I mean it. I look forward to it. So can you talk a little bit about, and this probably ties into everything we've talked about so far. I would guess that there's a purpose of education, conservation, and entertainment, I guess. And I don't necessarily mean entertainment as in the media part of it, but like the enjoyment we get as pet owners. I guess in theory, we could just leave these animals alone. We choose to become pet owners with them. So can you talk a little bit about that balance, education, conservation, and enjoyment with pets?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Snake Discovery's goal is to bridge the gap between reptiles and the general public. So those who are already into or have a fascination with reptiles are halfway there. So it's not terribly difficult to make them jump on board and like reptiles. And with more knowledge, they are more likely to take proper care of said reptiles and protect them in the wild. The tough part is reaching the public who doesn't have that fascination, might currently hate snakes, and trying to teach them that these aren't scary animals. They're fascinating, and they're not out there to get you and chase you down. So that is a challenge, but once you reach, especially the next generation, you can teach them to grow up to be reptile lovers for the rest of their lives. So our videos, I feel, it's a balancing act between entertainment and education. You have to be entertaining enough to keep people's attention, especially kiddos. Right. But you also want it to be educational. It's not all going to be just having fun with reptiles without any facts in there at all. There's plenty of channels that are all clickbait just for the entertainment aspect of things. But we really try to pull in the education. And I like to say we like to trick kids into learning. The more they learn, the more they know. They're sponges when they're young. They can absorb so much material. And I consider it a success when we're in our zoo and a 5-year-old comes up to me telling me about how hognose genetics work, how the morphs
Right.
react or interact with one another. Like that's a huge win for me, seeing how they're using that information in day-to-day life.
It's amazing to see, like you just mentioned, I'm in the ball python world, but kids with their parents, and they know what heterozygous and homozygous means, and the parents are going, I just want a snake. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no. I'm like, this kid, they get it. This is the future right here. And they do get it, and they do understand. And like you say, they're sponges. I think it's fantastic to see that. You brought up your zoo and the physical snake discovery location a couple times. Tell people a little bit about that. I'm fortunate enough to have been there, being local to Minnesota. But for so many people that see you, they might not be familiar or have an idea. What's sort of the mission of that? Why have the physical place? How does that fit into everything that we've talked about?
Everything kind of just fell into place. I was doing about 350 educational programs a year in 2019. I think I had the same amount planned for 2020. And December of 2019, we had been looking for buildings for a while just to move our reptiles to have more room. We as in my husband Ed and I, always had the dream of owning a reptile store. Not necessarily a full-on zoo, but our goal it started as just a reptile store. And while perusing vacant buildings, we stumbled across one in Maplewood that was about 10,000 square feet. And as we walked through, we were starting to envision more than just a store as we saw it in person. I remember walking through thinking, oh my gosh, we could have a display of reptiles in this room. We could have our private collection back here. We could have a rodent breeding room over here. It just all kind of pieced together. So with COVID hitting in March of 2020, we had bought the building in 2019, December, and construction was supposed to start in March of 2020. And
Wow.
we all know what happened there.
Right.
Came our COVID project. All of my programs for that year had to get canceled because of COVID, but the silver lining was we were able to focus on building our zoo instead. So timing-wise, it worked out very well for us. And now we have, when you first walk into our building, it's a reptile specialty store. There's supplies, there's feeders, there's reptiles. We run an adoption program there too. And then the public can pay an admission fee to walk through this cave that we built and enter our reptile exhibit area, which is our smaller indoor zoo. One of the goals was to, get dozens of reptiles out of our house and in a different building altogether, which was successful, I would say. But another goal was to have an opportunity to reach the public more directly rather than traveling for programs out of the house and connecting with people via digital media on YouTube. We wanted something that was more tangible and in person. So with the facility that we bought, we were finally able to do that all in one place.
Thank you for sharing that. I had some flashbacks of my time of March 2020. What is a little slight left turn here? What inspired you to keep going? Because I think most people said either stop, put everything on hold, which is probably what 80% of the world did, or American businesses did. And I'm making up these numbers, but just my own perception. And a smaller portion, 20%, said, we got to put the pedal down. What was it was a terrifying time. And you're talking about a very significant investment. There was already a lot of risk without, regardless of anybody thinks of the pandemic at the moment, it was a crazy time. What inspired you to keep going versus going, we just got to hold, this is a lot of money, a lot of risk. We need to hold off for a minute.
Our incentive was the mortgage on the building that we had just bought. Right. The bills didn't go away just because of COVID, and all of my programs were canceled anyway. So I just changed gears and started focusing on that project instead. We realized the sooner we opened, the sooner we could have that new stream of income coming in. So we actually opened in phases. We opened our store first so that we could start accumulating a local regular customer base. And then we could also start up our rescue program as well. And then we merged into the reptile exhibit area that opened second. And that's when we kind of had our grand opening because the majority of the building was up and running. And the following year, so I think January of 2022 was when our classroom or education department opened. And that's when we started doing in-house birthday parties and we continued our offsite programs again. So now all the gears are turning together, which has been fantastic. But yeah, it was the incentive again was the mortgage and the bills having to be paid. So we had to make it work.
Cool. I don't want to make today's talk a business talk, which I would. I would love to go down that rabbit hole. But
you and I both. Very business focused.
Kudos to you and Ed. I couldn't believe when I saw it was just recently, either the 4th or the 5th anniversary. I had this vision that you guys had been at it, and nothing's an overnight success. I know you were at it before the store started, but amazing what you've accomplished and been able to do in that amount of time. It's fantastic. It really struck me, and I've just always been impressed by you all on that topic. So, have you found that? Do you feel a responsibility? Maybe you didn't ask for. I hear athletes say, "I didn't ask to be a role model. I'm just somebody doing what I do." I think you've become a role model in the industry, whether you asked for it or not. What responsibilities do you feel in that light, or pressures do you feel, or have you run into headwinds or support? Do you feel? I know the support's got to. I see the lines. I mean, the support's phenomenal. Talk a little bit about all of those things.
Yeah, we are so lucky to have such a supportive fan base. We love all of our fans, and we're honestly blown away at every show we go to. We still have multiple hours long meet and greet, and it's just humbling to see that passion. And what makes it even more fun is we get to meet them in person and see new fans pop up because the next generation, kiddos are constantly finding the channel and getting into that passion when they discover reptiles as a whole. But with that, Spider-Man quote, with power comes great responsibility. Great power comes great responsibility. We had to change a couple things for the betterment of certain species of reptiles. One example that comes to mind is, now when we film videos, we realize there's a lot of people watching, and if we encourage something, we know it's probably going to be somewhat influential. So we first off try to encourage proper keeping of reptiles, trying to progress the hobby to make captive care as good as we possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
But with that also, there's a conservation approach. And with that, Snake Discovery started as a very conservation education forward type program. And in our videos, we were accidentally encouraging the keeping and therefore the wild caught activity of certain species of animals, just by showing them on our channel. For example, egg-eating snakes. We used to work a lot with African egg-eating snakes, and they're truly an amazing species of snake, but they're not often bred in captivity. Most of the specimens that are available in the trade are wild-caught. That being said, with almost all other species, they're becoming increasingly available captive bred, but still they're few and far between to find a captive bred animal. So by us showcasing egg-eating snakes and sharing all the fun facts about them, like, hey, this is a snake you don't have to feed mice to, which is a big concern with a lot of families. Sure. They were looking for egg eaters, and the only ones available were wild-caught animals. So they would buy those, and we realized, oh my gosh, this is the opposite effect. We want to help conserve the animals in the wild, not encourage more from being captured. So we stopped featuring egg-eating snakes because of that, and after that experience, we try to think of all of our videos and the species we work with. Will this be beneficial to the species by featuring it, or will it be detrimental and have unintended negative effects? So it's something we definitely have to keep in mind. We try to emphasize the importance of captive bred animals versus wild caught, since we do have a few species of animals that were the specimens we have were wild caught initially, but each time we show those now, we try to, explain why we have these animals. It's for education, and it's because we're trying to breed them ourselves so we can offer captive bred alternatives. But it's again a balancing act, since whatever you say is going to be influential, especially to the younger kiddos, and we don't want to accidentally encourage the wrong thing.
Thanks for sharing that, and I'm sure that probably could have touched a nerve and was difficult to focus on. That's something that Ty Park at Iguanaland wrestles with a lot. I know that he has challenges in that manner, and his goal is the conservation of the animals and education as well. So I think I think you're not alone in that. Of course, on a more fun topic, you guys are amazing at building community and the creative ways that you do it. And again, I always sort of lean a little bit towards business, but good community is great business. And it's amazing. I remember the first show, I think it was Tinley, the first time I got to vend Tinley and you all were there. And maybe it was tie-dye or something. Oh no, it was pajamas. I was like, all of these people, and I'm talking, keep me honest here, hundreds, thousands in pajamas, and you guys like name these themes that seemingly have nothing to do with the reptile community, yet everybody gets engaged. How did that happen? How did that evolve?
It started with a lost bet. So we told our subscribers.
That's the best answer ever.
I think you're referring to the onesie theme, which was the very start of the themed meet and greets.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. What happened there, which was a wonderful accident. We love that this happened. A fan sent me in fan mail a unicorn, like rainbow colored unicorn onesie, and it just so happened to fit like perfectly.
Okay.
So in this fan mail opening video, which we try to make videos opening fan mail because I want, if people send us something, I want them to see me open it, and I want to thank them as directly as I can. So we make videos to try to justify my thanks and appreciation. But it happened to fit. So I, in this video, said, okay, if we reach, I think at the time it was 2 million subscribers by the next Tinley show, which would have been March of 2020. I said, if we reach 2 million views or subscribers, I will wear this onesie to the Tinley show. And at this point, we didn't have official meet and greets. We would kind of bump into people or bump into fans at the show. But I made this a promise to everybody. And well, the March Tinley got canceled because of COVID. So technically, the next Tinley was October of 2020. And by then, we had surpassed 2 million. So I had to make good on the deal. So I'm like, oh, no, I didn't think, first off, March would get canceled. I was kind of banking on that, like not reaching 2 million by March. But because, a deal's a deal, I was going to wear the unicorn onesie to the October Tinley show. And once that news came out, I think everybody knew. They saw the 2 million subscribers hit, and they're like, oh, she's going to wear the unicorn onesie. The same family who sent me the onesie sent one for Ed in his size. So the two of us then agreed, okay, Ed will join me in on this. He'll wear the onesie as well. But we don't like the attention on us. We don't like try to I don't try begging for attention is what I'm trying to say. So being in a onesie is going to draw a lot of attention, I was so nervous for that show. So we thought, well, how can we encourage others to also wear unicorn or wear onesies in general? Well, let's design a pin. We'll give out a pin to thank those for not making us do this alone, essentially. So the challenge came out. Okay, if you wear a onesie of any sort, we'll give you a pin for the first 100. And man, did the fans come in force. There were so many onesies at that show. The support was just incredible. We honestly didn't think we had that many fans that showed up at these shows, but that's what kickstarted the dress themes. We had such a good time that we decided to continue it with a different dress theme each time. And what's kind of happened is we didn't intend this. With the wave of onesies coming in, a lot of the vendors who had never heard of us before, because we don't vend this show, we just go to shop, vendors were talking to each other like, what is going on? Is this like a convention for pajamas or for like costumes? What is going on? And eventually they would ask those who came in onesies, why so many onesies? And then the name Snake Discovery essentially was the answer. So our name got spread through that entire show that weekend. And it accidentally became a really good networking opportunity for us because then we became known with the vendors at that show.
I think it's a fun story on its own. I also think there's just layers of an onion of great business in there, saying thanks to the viewers, incorporating viewers, appreciation for the community. You've done? You've done like vendor passports around shows. What are some other community things that you do? Maybe locally or nationally. I'm sure some of them are focused here in the neighborhood. Some of them are focused nationwide or at these national shows. What are some of the different ways that you see building community as an opportunity?
We try to connect with the community in as many ways as possible. For local experiences, the major holidays, we try to have some sort of themed event at our zoo. So for Easter, we have an Easter egg hunt. For Halloween coming up, we'll have a trick-or-treating event and a costume contest. We bring Santa in for December, photos with Santa, whether it's yourself, your kid, or your reptile. You can have your reptile take photos with Santa. Just things to keep the community engaged locally. And then on a more widespread example, we do a couple contests every year just to encourage our fans to get involved, whether it be donating to US Ark in exchange for possibly winning a hognose snake. We like to do a fundraiser every year. So last year was US Ark for the hognose snake. This year was the Rattlesnake Conservancy, and we raised $16,000 just with donations in exchange for putting your name in a drawing. And we drew all the winners last week. That was so much fun. But we realized, well, for the long distance challenges, we don't want to require you to have to like pay to be a part of it. So this year we tried something new, and we're always trying to come up with new ideas. This year we challenged fans to pick up a bag of garbage, and take a selfie with it. And there was a certain tagline on Instagram, I think, Snake Discovery Cleanup 2025. And of those who entered in that way, we would pick one to win a free hognose. So that was a lot of fun. It was, if you scroll through Instagram and see all these selfies of bags of trash being picked up, it's really heartwarming, and again, humbling to see how many people are really involved in this community, and we're all one big happy family, essentially.
I love hearing the overlaps. I think of different industries that would do the very same things you're talking about. Malls, pictures with Santa, restaurants. Basically, like, community is sort of like happy people making happy memories together, and it doesn't have to be like. No, I can't think of a mall or a restaurant that goes, hey, it's this particular store or this hot fashion trend. It's just a happy time to enter into the place. And I don't know why. I feel like sometimes with reptiles or pets, we put these guardrails on that it has to be, it's about this versus just about a community that happens to be of reptile people or reptile keepers.
Yeah, and like, having these normal events, you can go to a mall and get a photo with Santa. You can go to an Easter egg hunt outside at, I think churches typically host those, I don't know. But to incorporate reptiles into them just helps encourage them being kept as more mainstream pets more and more. I think the public is recognizing reptiles as a legitimate hobby and lifestyle. And it can be incorporated into fun events like that. And it's normal. We're all normal people doing normal events. And I think it's finally getting accepted. And I think community plays a huge part of it.
I don't know how to put it. I think I agree on the community. And I think that it has to be almost natural and organic. Or that's going to be the most powerful message when a 7-year-old, their parents, and then, their uncle, when there's the legitimate community is enjoying something, it's going to have so much more authenticity. It's going to be so much harder to regulate against. We've been pretty positive today, which I love about you, but what are some headwinds that you see, that you face, and that maybe our community faces? Because as much as we want to normalize reptile ownership, there's still a little bit of a hush hush or a dangerous or an edginess to it that is fun, but that doesn't advocate for our cause, I would say.
There are a few people out, not a few, there's that population of outliers who don't keep reptiles responsibly. And it's those folks that put a bad light on reptile keeping as a whole, whether it be someone free handling venomous snakes and they get bit, and then it makes all reptile keepers look bad. Or someone who neglects their animals and then makes the public think that reptile keepers just ignore their animals and don't actually care about their will or ability to thrive in captivity. So unfortunately, there are those keepers, which is why we try so hard to promote good reptile keeping husbandry tactics, just to try to raise kids right and adults right if they're just getting into reptiles. Since I think education is the biggest thing we can do. But another hurdle that we've run into, which I think every animal field has this, is just controversial subjects relating to that animal. There's bird keepers, and I have a couple birds at home. There's controversial subjects when it comes to keeping parrots. Do you clip their wings? Do you not clip their wings? And we do keep reptiles, in our way, which we are very proud of how we keep our reptiles. But there are some disagreements. Some folks, don't like the use of snake racks, and I completely understand. There are some keepers out there, some breeders who have, say, a ball python in a bin in a rack that takes up half of the space, and that does make racks look bad. We try to use racks in a way that is good for the reptile. It allows them to stretch out. We provide enrichment. So we try to use them in a way that's like kind of a win-win situation. You have the benefit of saving some footprint, some space by using a rack. They're so much more economical, but also still giving the snake the environment that it needs. But it's tough for some folks to really accept racks and other aspects of reptile keeping as being acceptable, versus they can only be kept with this substrate, all those controversies.
Right. And maybe this, here we go, Emily. Here's our chance to solve all the problems in the world. How do we navigate those differences? Respectfully, right? Nothing to hide. There's a rack system behind me, and
I use racks, yeah,
and 4x2s behind you. How do we navigate those discrepancies and not lose sight of sort of the bigger community and the bigger picture?
Oh, that's such a good question, because I don't know if there is like a direct answer to that. I think
maybe how do you navigate it? Because I think you do well with it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Just we try to explain everything that we do, and we try to be as transparent as possible, but also try to get the point across that if we were to provide, 4x2x2s for every snake in our collection, or 6x2x2s, we wouldn't be able to breed enough to keep up with demand. And therefore animals would be taken from the wilds just to keep up with that demand. So that's how I try to justify it. It can be tough to kind of get that through, but you do have to keep them more economically in order to have the captive bred availability to the public. That doesn't mean they have to be squished in racks, but there's a happy medium,
I agree, and I think the intentionality is really important. I think listening to each other is important, and it's a nuanced and difficult understanding sometimes that having pets and having captive bred inventory, as much as I hate to make anything a widget or a business, because it's far more than that. But the fact is that prevents wildlife destruction, poaching, unsafe shipping. These are, it's in the name. They're exotic pets. They're generally not here in our backyard. There are some that are in our backyard that are very cool, and they should stay in our backyard. I don't think that it's a little bit harder for people to understand that argument, or that, not even argument, that explanation. But when they put thought into it, it is important that we have a captive bred group of animals so that we don't need to take from the wild anymore, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There's a compromise that has to be made in order to protect the wild populations. So if conservation really is the goal here, there unfortunately are going to have to be some snakes kept in racks, even if you don't like racks, in order to produce them. Otherwise, you just have to think of that ripple effect and the negative impact it has on the environment. It's a tough situation.
It is a tough situation, and well, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of racks, and that's all over the internet. There's all kinds of places. There's plenty of information out there for it. I guess what I would say is both have been professionally and intentionally designed. These aren't just toolboxes or that animals are being shoved into. So but we can leave that one there. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. So what does with all the momentum that you add snake discovery and then the bigger funnel of the whole community, what does the future look like? What's your hope and vision? And we started with the why for snake discovery, of why it began. What's the why today looking forward?
The hobby, it's growing. If I remember correctly, the reptile industry is the fastest growing pet industry right now. I believe bird demand is going down. I think fish is going up, but not as quickly as reptiles. There's just a huge demand for reptiles right now. So with that growth comes the need for higher standards of keeping whenever possible. And with that, I guess that's the encouragement to come out with these new products every year. It seems like there's new practices, new research coming out every year, new items you can use to better the care for your reptiles. And I think that progression is something that just needs to be encouraged. If it continues the way it does, who knows how we're going to keep reptiles, 20 years from now. If 20 years ago they were all in the, tiny little shoe boxes, and it's just incredible to see the evolution over just the past couple of decades. But we have to keep that going in order to continue keeping exotic pets, including reptiles, responsibly for the next few generations. So I think just education and progression is probably the biggest goal in protecting that industry in the future.
I think a metric that I take a lot of pride and comfort in is seeing mainstream companies like Chewy.com or like Palm Street support even things like Epic, or when we walk into Tinley. I don't know about you, but I noticed even in the few years I've been going to Tinley, I've noticed a great change with the support and the sponsors that want to have their names in front of the reptile community and that want to both support the reptile community, but also be included in the reptile community. I'm guessing that's an evolution even since you've been very active in reptiles. Is that something that you're seeing and hearing more and more about behind the scenes?
Yeah, it seems like so my background, when I first got into exotic pets, when I got into birds, I was working at PetSmart. I worked there for about a decade. It's actually how I met my husband. He was a customer and wanted to learn about birds. So that's how we initially met. But when I first started, when I was 16, I believe, at PetSmart, there was just a single 4-foot loggia shelving section for reptile supplies. By the time I left, I believe it was an entire aisle, which would have been like 8 of those 4-foot sections, just completely reptile supplies, whether it be enclosures or in decor or food for them. It's just, it exploded. And the other categories of pets reduced in size as a result. So it was interesting to see that transition over the years, over the decade or so that I was there. But it really shows that the reptile community can and is leading the way for best practices, supporting conservation and as a result, and just the popularity of exotic pets as a whole with just reptiles alone. It's incredible to see the demand changing over the years. I think reptile ownership, what was it? I had it written down because I thought it was a really cool fact. Reptile ownership increased by 40% between 2011 and 2020, which I think means there's about 6%, maybe 5 to 6% of American homes in the US have a pet reptile, which doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot more than it was.
We coincidentally spoke with Grant Crossman from Canadian Reptile Breeders Expo, and he talked about talking to politicians and advocating. And I said, "What's the response that you get?" And he said, "We find that either the politician themselves, their children or their parents, or a close relative has a reptile. And there is a close bond, and it's that far reaching." And I think as small as 5 or 6% may sound of the general population, that's kind of the example of you don't have to go very far to reach 5 or 6% with almost any person that you talk to. And I even find that in a local town that I've just started a commercial setting in, and they say, oh, I had a roommate that had this, or my kids have this, or my cousin, everybody's got that sort of tangent to it. And I think it's getting closer and closer to everybody.
I think so. And yeah, even the type of person, the demographics are changing over the years. I think previously reptiles or snake keepers in the 80s, when they were starting to get some traction, were very much primarily male or guys who would keep reptiles. And now it's just over 50% of reptile keepers are actually women, believe it or not. So it's crazy to see that switch. And I was looking into it the other day. The highest age, or the age group that has the most reptiles, is the millennials, the 30-year-olds right now. And that's closely followed by Gen Z, I believe, is the second largest age group for keeping reptiles. But it's starting to spread, and we can kind of see it in our channel's demographics and who's watching our videos. For our channel, it's about 2/3 female, according to accounts, and a third male or non-binary. And for the age group, our largest age group is the millennials, those who are my age and Ed's age, 30-year-olds. And then the second largest group is the 20-year-olds, and then it goes to under 18. But it's an interesting slope around the millennials and kind of the 30 years old on either side. But even that has changed from year to year. Just incredible.
I think it's been neat to see those metrics evolve. And I think you're talking some about the behind the scenes on YouTube channels that your own channel, that you can look at those metrics. When I advertise with Facebook, I see a lot of those same things. And I go, this isn't exactly what the quote stereotype is or what people expect. And I think it's refreshing to see. I think it's exciting evolution, and the more people that we can reach, and the more understanding and sort of maybe empathy is the right word, is always exciting. Emily, to wrap this up, my last question: what can viewers do in their own lives if they say, I don't have a platform like Epic, I don't have a YouTube channel with literally millions of followers? Congratulations.
Well,
what can they do in their own lives? What can they do in their own day-to-day walk of life to quote reach masses or to grow the community?
That's a good question. For us, the goal with our YouTube channel wasn't to gain subscribers or to become famous or anything. Honestly, we just wanted to spread our passion for reptiles in a video format. So I think it depends on what your goal is. If you want to make money with reptiles, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. I will say, when I first started Snake Discovery, it was, again, an educational program type business. And I spent the first entire year just networking and advertising and really getting our name out there. And it did pay off in the end, but I needed to have financial support, which was Ed's wage and his job, while I focused on growing that business. So having dedication, having the drive to keep going long term, and don't quit your day job to focus on reptiles. But there definitely are ways to get your foot in the door. So if someone is listening and they want to be involved with reptiles as their career, but they don't know how to start, honestly, volunteering, whether with your herpetological society or local reptile rescue or local zoos, experience is the best way to start a career with reptiles. For me, I got my bachelor's in fisheries and wildlife, and I wanted to jump right into a zookeeper position, a naturalist position, which I only got a 3-month gig. I didn't have a full-time one initially. And I couldn't find anything that would accept me without having actual experience with other organizations. So honestly, the degree didn't really matter. It was lack of experience that made me have to kind of go off on my own and do my own thing. But it just goes to show how important networking and getting your foot in the door early will impact your career long term. So yeah, just Volunteer is my recommendation.
Emily, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for your time, your insight, your care, and I appreciate what you've done and continue to do for our community. And it is a community, and thank you so much for supporting Epic. I want to say thanks to the audience. This is our second season now of Epic. Thank you very, very much for the support and making it worthwhile to come back and do a second one. We couldn't do this without the support of companies like Redline Shipping, Pangea, Vivarium Electronics, Palm Street,